I'm live. Okay, I'm going to just start answering some questions because I don't really care. I'm not worried about if people show up. Um, but I have a bunch of questions here that were asked on my channel, and I thought maybe they'd be good to make a video about. So this will be the video. And the first one, I'll cover the one from my buddy Les Martin. Les, I hope you get a chance to see this. Um, he asks these in an email. He says, if I understand correctly, Peter Charles thinks setting the anchor in front of you that it decreases productive weight, but it seems long distance casters prefer the anchor in a forward position. What do you think? Okay, so Peter Charles recently came up with like a series of spay casting videos, and it would be good to watch him because Peter is a good caster, good fisherman. He's totally into this stuff, and he can really answer some questions. So he's got a great channel. He is a just a hub of information. I highly recommend Peter Charles, Fly Fishing for Life. What's it called? Hooked for Life, Fly Fishing. Okay. So he's got a ton of information on there. I totally recommend that. So as far as the anchor in front of you, it's entirely dependent on what kind of rig you're casting. So if you're casting a Skagit head, it doesn't matter. And Scandi, it depends on exactly what you're trying to do. If you're backed up against the brush and you're trying to fish with a bunch of brush in your hip pocket, then yeah, you want that anchor in front of you as far as you can, because you don't want your D-loop in the brush. It has mostly to do with fishing and what the line system you're using. So with Skagit, it doesn't matter until you are backed up into the brush or you have a stiff wind backed up into the brush, and then you want the anchor way out in front of you. And I totally speak from experience because the last time I fished had gale force winds. There was spray shooting up off the rocks. There was gusts that made me like stumble downstream. It was kind of stupid that I was even fishing, but I had a good run that I wanted to fish, and I just wanted to get the fly out there and fish. So when I got in areas where the wind was really high, there was trees above me, and there was brush and grass in my back pocket. Totally, I got the line way out in front of me. And I also totally reverted to my top hand um, for for battling the wind. Um, and I was casting the Rio Scandi Versatip, and I do a video on this that's going to come out pretty soon. It was pretty cool. But yeah, I got my anchor way out there in front of me. I kept my D loop, everything low to the water, and I got some amazing casts out. So, hey, thanks on the Fly Adventures. I appreciate that. So, and as far as so for distance casting for comp lines and spay casting competition, most of the guys want the anchors way out in front of them, and it it works really good. Travis Johnson's documented a bunch of this. If you get a chance to get his book, you might want to do that. But most most longline casters who are going for distance, who are competition casters at Spayarama, and those kind of things, they want the anchor out in front. Do you have to get real fussy about, perfectly out in front or a little to the front and to the side? I've had some really great casts go off when the anchor um, was just kind of out in front of me. So don't get too caught up in the minutia. Just it does help with the longer lines, and it may be the taper, it may be the leader. Um, it does help to get the anchor out in front of you. One um, very good video to watch is Brian Steiskal. It's called Spaycraft Project. Spaycraft Project, I think it is. And this was before he was in the top 10. I don't know, it was 10, 15 years ago when he made this video. Him and Greg Bensavinga, they were casting long lines in Portland and at another place where Brian Steiskal practiced. And it was so cool to watch him make these casts with the anchor right in front of him, casting right over the top of the fly, basically, or maybe the fly was a little bit to the right, but he was just casting some amazing casts. And this was before he was like great. This was before he was he might have been in Spayarama top 10, but he was definitely a good caster. I would love it if I could get to the point where he was then 10 or 12 years ago, and now he's in the top 10 Spayarama finals pretty consistently. Albert is his casting coach, and it's really cool to watch him cast. But anyway, anchor stays out in front. The rest of it depends on if you're fishing, and if you get the anchor right next to you and blow the anchor, uh, sometimes it sometimes it goes out great. Other times it doesn't go as well. So I like it out in front of me, but when you're practicing and fishing, experiment with it and see what works best for you. But for long line casting, I prefer it out in front of me. Then the next question is, also I see rods with fast recovery tips. It seems like on still water you can pause any on the lift and may start the lift with more line on the water to maintain tension since you don't have moving water. I don't really think about it that much. I just try to roll cast out there when I'm on kind of slack water and get my line tight and then go to casting. And sometimes if I'm casting on slack water or slightly downwind current going from left to right, and the wind is not going to allow me, say the wind's blowing downstream too, and I have to cast right handed. So I'll cast upstream and try to keep as much tension in the rod by keeping my rod tip down and then, not wasting any time. So on still water, no, I try not to pause. Yeah, that's a good point. I try to just get the cast going. Um, do I start the line in the lift with the line in the water to maintain tension? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't. I just try to keep tension in the line. Fast recovery rods may easily unload on the forward cast if not progressive in power. Um, for me, when I was learning to cast longer lines, I started with a rod that was medium as far as recovery and as far as flexing. It wasn't a fast action rod, it wasn't stiff. And I kind of had trouble until I went with a stiffer rod and then it got easier for me. And when I was learning touch and go casting with scandi lines, my first rod I tried to do that with was a Beulah Platinum, the 8 foot 4 inch, 12 foot 4 inch 8 weight. And I struggled a bit because with the softer rod, that rod probably is a little bit better for waterborne casts. And with the softer rod, I kind of felt like I was behind the curve with my timing. So when I went with the TCX stiff rod, I felt I had more contact and it was easier to learn touch and go casting with a stiffer rod. Even with the longer line, I had a TCX, which was the Death Star, only a 10 weight. With a longer line, I had a fall favorite 70 with my TCX, and the TCX helped a lot because being stiffer, I just felt I had more contact. If you have a soft rod, you can. I felt I lost a little bit of contact with touch and go casting. You can feel the rod bend, but the line doesn't have to be loading the rod in order for it to bend because the rod bends on its own. So I think for touch and go casting, a rod that's a little stiffer made it easier for me. For long line casting, a rod that was a little stiffer kind of made it easier for me. I'd definitely say you wouldn't want a super soft, bendy rod for that, but that's just my 2 cents. Um, for similarly, fast recovery rods may easily unload on the forward cast if not progressive in power. You just blew my mind, Les. Um, I don't even know how to answer that. Just, I think fast. I don't know. Don't overthink this stuff, you guys. Just, just practice and fish. Also, here's a astute observation. The short belly lines, longer rods make you ask the question, why? Yeah, for, not for me. Short belly lines on longer rods are usually pretty good to cast with. It depends on how short of a belly, but if you're throwing a scandi on a long rod, then you just slow down and pay attention and watch your anchor and don't get in a hurry. And a short belly, if you're graduating from a short belly line is probably even longer than a scandi, I guess. I guess you could say a scandi is a short belly, but don't overthink it. Practice a lot, and if you practice enough, and I mean practice through some really rough patches, this is not like learning to play classical guitar or anything like that. It should be reasonably easy if you put the time in, but sometimes it takes quite a few hours, but it's really not that difficult. So time on the water, fishing and casting is the thing, and when you run into a problem, you got to keep casting till you get through it. You just can't give up and throw your hands up. You got to get some eyes on you and have somebody watch you. Thanks, Trevin. Appreciate it, buddy. So it's really about practice and spending the time on the water And even if you have somebody watch you that really doesn't even know anything, because if they watch a video of a guy casting correctly and then watch you, it'll be really easy for them to say, like, um, your your line is sticking to the water, or you know, which is a big problem, or you're jerky or whatever. So have somebody watch you if you're struggling. And the cool thing about Skagit casting, cool thing about spey casting is you can struggle at any level because there's always a longer line and a heavier tip and a new challenge. So if you have somebody watch and you work yourself through, you can always make progress. So anyway, thanks, Les. I hope that helps. I also recommended Andrew Moy in his long casting videos, long belly casting videos, and he's got a cool one called Bombs Away Spey. Any of his spey casting videos are very good because he explains the right thing right at the right time. And it's really a great resource for struggling casters. Then I had another question from a guy. It's from Whip Finish. Whip Finish Fly Fishing, I think it is. They have a YouTube channel. They got some cool videos on there. And the question was about, well, they talked about setting up a leader for a Scandinavian shooting heads. So the thing about Scandinavian shooting heads, and probably in North America we have Rio Scandi lines. There was the Airflow Compact. Now there's Airflow's got a long one. There's Beulah Switch and the Beulah Elixir lines, Beulah Elixir Switch, and the Scientific Anglers Spaylight Scandi. Those are super sweet lines. I have one. I have a really little one for my single hander. The main thing about the Scandi situation is, as far as leaders, the underhand guys, the real Scandi guys use 15 to 17 to 20 to even longer leaders. And the idea with those is you just use the leader for the anchor. But here in North America and the Pacific Northwest, you can do it with a 7-foot leader. Thanks, Sean, or a 15-foot leader or 17, whatever. If you're fishing and you get confused about poly leaders and sink tips and light sink tips and mono leaders on your Scandi line, just do what works. The Scandi line usually casts a mono leader really nice, anywhere from 7-foot to 12 to 15-foot, level mono or tapered mono. 15-foot tapered mono probably would be great. I just use a level mono and a fly. A lot of guys like to use Versatips or poly leaders, and those are fine too. When I'm fishing a Scandi line, I just, if you want to go strict underhand, use the long leader. If not, use whatever you want. Just anchor more of the fly line during the cast. It's really pretty straightforward. Don't overthink it. Use whatever it takes to get your fly to the fish. The other thing is, Whip Finish wanted to know about using a Scandi line with, they were doing indicator fishing on lakes and stuff using some really long, for chironomid fishing and stuff. And for that, I would say, if I'm gonna fish a if I'm gonna fish a nymph on a scandi or on a scadja, if I'm gonna nymph fish with a scadget head, I'll use the shortest scadget head available and a 5 foot homemade floating tip or a OPST. They have the 5 foot salmon. That's what I would choose. Salmon and steelhead floating tip. 7.5 foot salmon and steelhead floating tip, and the 12 foot floating tip. It's about 100 grains, and that might be a little long for fishing a bobber. But if I'm fishing a thingamabobber on the end of a scadget head, it's usually with like a 5 foot floater, and then I'll have a straight level mono leader down to my nymph, which is usually some kind of streamer, which is black Sculpzilla. So I'll have shooting head, short floating leader, bobber, and then straight mono down to the Sculpzilla. If you're doing, and that's probably what I would say would be good. If you're using really, really, really long leader, if you're using a 25 foot leader to chironomid fish, then you could probably, I don't even know what to tell you, but you might even just put your leader on the end of the scadget head or the scadget head with a short floater, or you might even just you just have to experiment and see what works, but don't try not to be bogged down by any rules as far as casting rules and leader rules for casting. The reason I don't use long mono leaders when I'm fishing a scandi line, I usually use a sink tip always, just about, which isn't great unless I'm fishing a long belly line, and then I'll just use straight mono leader, like 13 feet or something. But the reason I don't use a scandi head and a rod and a half length of floating leader is just because by the time I get back in the pontoon or the car and re-rig my rod to travel and then get back out, I don't like dealing with like 17 feet of mono, so I just use a OPST or a little homemade Max Cat shooting head with a light sink tip and 3 or 4 feet of straight level mono leader. But don't overthink it, you guys. Experiment. Throw away all the rules and see what works best for you. And you might be able to get away with a scandi line and one of those strike indicators that sucks through your guides for chironomid fishing. I'm not a big chironomid guy, but don't worry about rules. Just see what works and then do that. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. A guy asks me, Richard Ness, he's gonna hook up with Andrew for a spay casting lesson. That's great. If you guys can get a lesson from a good guy, do it. It'll cut years off your learning curve. Anyway, hope that's helpful. I'm doing a lot of tying lately. Shout out to my buddy Scott Crosby. Scott makes these beautiful creations. and he's tying up winter flies right now. If you want some cool winter flies, I'll show you what he is capable of tying. That bad boy looks a little rough because I've had it in a box, but he makes these beautiful flies like this. There's thought goes into the whole thing. I wish he showed up better. Hang on. A lot of thought goes into these beautiful creations. He uses the jungle cockeyes. A lot of times he uses Jerry French's that I forget where you put the little tube, the junction tubing, the aquafly's junction tubing. He uses that a lot. Here's one of them here. And this junction tubing is super cool because it's light and it helps. I presume it's for to keep your fly from fouling a lot. But it's light and it's not wire, and then that way if you do hook up, they can't get a lot of leverage because it bends so good. That's my guess. But Scott Crosby withholds no good thing on his flies. They are super cool. That one's got everything on it. His winter flies, John Hazel and George Cook, they use his flies like if George is going to Alaska kingfishing. This thing is just gorgeous. He'll go to Scott's place and just destroy his wall of cool finished spay flies. Shout out to Scott, and also I can't shout out to Scott without calling out to Straights on the Fly Custom Flies. Alex sent me some cool flies. If you want to go the scandi route, the those cool ones that have a keel and really sexy looking that the scandi guys use. Straights on the Fly Custom Flies, super talented kid. And then you have me. This thing, like, this is what I tie. It would be really probably good casting if you had like a comp rod with a 900 grain Skagit head on it. But anyway, pretty colors make me happy. Thanks to the guys that helped me out. So I appreciate the views. Yeah, Phyllis, there is some hair on this one. I don't even know if this will swim. I don't know if it will cast. And when I do composite loops, I always get carried away. But it's really easy to remedy that by just, if they don't swim right, just start pulling stuff out. Give them a haircut on the river. Give them a haircut on the river. I'm to the point where I don't like difficult flies that are difficult to cast. I had to just figure out that I'm going to have fun casting and not get all weirded out and freaked out about the fish, especially when people are catching them and I'm not, because that will play serious games with your head. So I just decided I'm going to make this about casting. If I get a fish, I get a fish. And then tie up monstrosities like this. And if it casts like a mop, I'll just start ripping stuff out of it until it casts right and swims right. So if you have more questions, holler at me and maybe I'll be able to answer them on air. Thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate the views. Have a Merry Christmas, and holler if you have any questions I can ask. Thanks. And now I don't even know how to quit doing a live cast. 30 minutes of talking. Thanks, Sean Thomas. Thank you for watching. I appreciate everybody who watched. Holler if I can help you. Thank you for all the views.